the challenge did not arrive as a challenge. That was how Lin Fan knew the sender had some intelligence and too much pride. Formal challenges in the outer sect required names, rank, distance, time, witness, and a small fee paid in contribution slips. The rules existed to prevent strong disciples from farming the weak too openly, which meant strong disciples had spent years inventing ways to harm without touching the rules. The note came on the fourth morning after his reassessment, folded into the seam of his ration token pouch. Not under the door. Not thrown through the window. Placed where only someone who had passed close enough to touch his belt could have hidden it. Lin Fan found it after leaving the meal hall. He did not open it immediately. The first rule of hidden messages was that the message itself was rarely the first danger. The placement was. Whoever had inserted it had either approached him in a crowd without triggering his senses, or used someone near him who could touch without suspicion. Wang Lei? No. Too clumsy. Lin Ro? No. She would not hide a note there, and anyone using her would choose kindness, not dexterity. Meal hall steward? Possible. Serving line contact, sleeve brush, token pouch exposed when receiving rations. The steward had enough access and little enough status to be purchased by many people. Lin Fan walked past the washing court, turned into the narrow path behind the herb drying shed, and stopped where the wall blocked sight from the main yard. Only then did he unfold the paper with a sliver of broken tile rather than his fingers. One line. If a rank rises without a strike, the practice posts will laugh. No signature. Of course. Arrogant people liked anonymity when they wanted deniability and recognition at the same time. The wording pointed toward the practice posts. The lack of name pointed toward someone ranked too high to challenge directly without lowering himself. Lin Fan burned the paper with lamp ash and a spark from a friction stone. He watched the smoke. Cheap ink. No poison. No tracking powder visible. The fold pattern was precise, inner hall style. That narrowed the sender. By noon, the meaning became public. At the lower training court, a new mark had appeared on the third ironwood post from the east. 3 finger widths steep. Clean edges. Fire chi at the center, metal pressure along the rim. The disciples gathered around it in layers, murmuring as if a wound in wood were scripture. Lu Sheng did it at dawn. 1 palm? 1 palm. He said anyone placed above 700 should at least leave a scratch. He didn't say Lin Fan. He didn't need to. Lin Fan heard the name before he saw the mark. Lu Sheng. Outer rank 92. High-grade fire root with a thin metal secondary tendency. Not enough metal to shape his path, enough to make his palm force sharp rather than explosive. In the first life, Lu Sheng had entered the inner sect 2 years later, lost an arm on a mission near Blackreed Marsh, blamed the wrong person, and died trying to steal a bone-forging pill from someone with better guards. Talented. Proud. Not important long-term except as a lesson in the dangers of thinking early advantage meant destiny. Currently, however, useful. Lu Sheng had built his place in the outer sect carefully enough to mistake it for natural order. He did not bully like Zhang Hu. He did not need to. His pressure came through invitations, training comparisons, borrowed praise, and the gentle humiliation of being asked to demonstrate after others failed. He lent advice to disciples just below him, accepted gratitude from those too low to threaten him, and ignored everyone beneath that unless their existence became useful scenery. This made him popular among disciples who confused selective courtesy with generosity. It also made him dangerous to offend publicly. Zhang Hu's anger had been a club. Lu Sheng's pride was a room full of hooks. If Lin Fan answered too aggressively, every disciple who had once received Lu Sheng's advice would feel required to disapprove. If he appeared too weak, Lu Sheng would gain credit for exposing him without spending a formal challenge. If he impressed too openly, Lu Sheng could call it hidden provocation and escalate through higher-ranked hands. The postmark was not a test of strength. It was a test of whether Lin Fan understood social force. Fortunately, social force was still force. And force always needed a path. Lu Sheng did not stand near the post. That would have made the challenge too obvious. He stood under the shade of the southern eaves, speaking with 3 disciples ranked between 100 and 200. Clean robe. Red thread around his wrist. Hair tied with a copper clasp. Hands relaxed as if he had forgotten they could injure wood. He noticed Lin Fan arriving and did not look directly at him. That was the performance. The crowd looked instead. Lin Fan walked to the edge of the court and studied the mark from a distance. Not bad. For body tempering. The palm had entered cleanly, but Lu Sheng had wasted heat on display. The fire chi had blackened the wood around the center. Efficient force would have left less burn and deeper compression. The metal edge was better. That meant his secondary tendency was more disciplined than his main route, an imbalance that would later create the arm injury if untreated. Knowing that helped nothing today. Today, the mark was a question. Could Lin Fan answer? If he ignored it, disciples would say his new rank was paper. If he struck and failed, jealousy would become laughter. If he struck and succeeded too clearly, Lu Sheng would have reason to escalate, Elder Gu would have reason to tighten observation, and Yu Qing or someone like her would have reason to pull the thread harder. The correct answer was not strength. It was ownership of expectation. Han Wei stood near the water rack, arms folded. Lin Fan noticed him because Han Wei made no attempt to hide. That, too, was a statement. Their unfinished exchange from before dawn remained between them, but Han Wei had chosen not to turn it into public debt. He watched the postmark with a fighter's interest and Lin Fan with a more complicated one. Lu Chen stood beside him, quieter as always. When Lin Fan's gaze passed over them, Lu Chen lowered his eyes by a fraction. Not submission. Acknowledgement. He had understood that the postmark was a trap with several mouths. Good. Intelligent spectators made scenes cleaner. An outer disciple near the post raised his voice. Senior brother Lin, your rank is above 700 now, isn't it? Senior brother. Mocking or testing? Both. The speaker was broad-faced, nervous around the eyes. Not Lu Sheng's direct follower. A borrowed tongue. Someone low enough to be discarded if the provocation angered the wrong person. Lin Fan looked at him. The board says so. Then do you want to try? Try what? The boy's smile faltered. He had expected refusal or anger, not clarification. The post. The sect owns the post. Murmurs. The boy glanced toward Lu Sheng's shaded group. It's just practice. Then practice. A few disciples laughed before swallowing the sound. The boy flushed. I mean, everyone wants to see. Everyone wants many things. Lin Fan turned as if to leave. The crowd shifted, disappointed and excited at once. Refusal could be called cowardice. Cowardice could restore order. Several mouths opened. Lu Sheng finally spoke from the shade. Junior brother Lin. There it was. Not senior brother. Rank 92 had acknowledged rank 643 only as junior. Fair. Lin Fan stopped. Lu Sheng stepped away from the eaves. His smile was controlled, handsome in a way that worked better on disciples who had not watched King's Plead. No need to be tense. I only left a practice mark. If others compare themselves, that is their immaturity. Elegant. He placed the burden of immaturity on the crowd while keeping the mark. Lin Fan turned back. Then senior brother Lu is not asking me to strike. Of course not. Good. The answer landed wrong for Lu Sheng. His smile held, but the red thread around his wrist moved as his fingers flexed once. Lin Fan continued, a disciple under medical observation should not damage sect property to satisfy spectators. Elder Gu's language. Borrowed authority. The crowd felt it and disliked it because it was difficult to attack. Lu Sheng's eyes sharpened. Medical observation did not stop your rank from rising. It stopped my challenge rights. A practice post is not a challenge. Then my absence from it is not a refusal.
Han Wei's mouth twitched. Lu Chen looked at the ground. Lu Sheng's smile cooled. Words are nimble. They require less recovery than poems. The crowd's silence became attentive.
Lin Fan had not raised his voice.
He had not insulted Lu Sheng.
Yet every answer moved the challenge away from the post and into the space where Lu Sheng's deniability thinned. If Lu Sheng pressed harder, he would admit the mark was aimed at Lin Fan.
If he did not, the scene ended with Lin Fan untouched and unbent. Pride disliked both. Lu Sheng looked toward the post, then back. You misunderstand. I value improvement.
A disciple who rises suddenly should be encouraged to test himself.
Encouragement from senior brother is generous. Then accept it. There. The indirect challenge became almost direct. Still not formal. Still deniable.
Lin Fan lowered his gaze for one breath, letting the crowd imagine hesitation.
He needed a response now. Not a palm strike. Not retreat.
Something that answered the measure without entering Lu Sheng's frame.
The practice posts stood in a row.
Lu Sheng had marked the third from the east. The fifth post had an old split near the base, wrapped in hempen resin. The split weakened the post if struck hard. The seventh leaned a fraction because the soil beneath it settled after rain. The first was newest.
The second held 3 old palm marks.
The fourth had knots deep under the surface. The third, Lu Sheng's post, was strong. But the mark he left had damaged more than he realized. Fire scorched fibers.
Metal pressure cut around the burn.
If struck at the center, resistance remained high. If touched at the rim with the correct vibration, the damaged fibers would loosen and deepen without raw force. The method carried risk.
Not physical risk alone. If the movement looked too miraculous, it would smell of hidden technique.
If it looked too weak, the crowd would miss the point and Lu Sheng would gain room to press again. The correct action had to be visible enough for trained eyes, confusing enough for fools, and humiliating enough that Lu Sheng would feel the wound without being able to display it cleanly. Lin Fan considered using the first burial ring.
Only for a breath.
The ring could chill the fingertip chi, make the wood fibers brittle, and produce a deeper crack with less effort. It would also teach the ring that public pressure justified involvement. That lesson was poison. Forbidden methods loved excuses. Today a post.
Tomorrow a wrist. Later a heart. No. He would use ordinary chi and extraordinary timing.
That distinction mattered even if no one else could see it. Lin Fan walked toward the post. The crowd parted.
Excitement returned. Lu Sheng's eyes gleamed. Han Wei straightened by a fraction. At arm's length from the post, Lin Fan stopped.
He did not take a striking stance. He reached out with 2 fingers. The crowd made a sound halfway between confusion and contempt. Lin Fan touched the lower rim of Lu Sheng's palm mark.
Not enough chi to glow. Not enough pressure to bruise skin.
The first burial ring rotated once, chilling the thread of chi before it entered his fingertips.
He sent no power into the post. He sent timing. The damaged fibers answered.
A faint crack sounded inside the wood.
The original mark deepened by half a finger width. No new mark. No visible strike.
Only Lu Sheng's existing palm wound sinking farther into the post, as if his own force had belatedly continued after he left. The court went utterly still. Lin Fan withdrew his hand. His fingertips trembled. That was real. The technique had required more precision than strength, but precision through a damaged root still cost. He turned to Lu Sheng. Senior brother's palm had not fully settled, he said. It would be disrespectful to cover it with mine.
For one breath, nobody understood. Then Han Wei laughed once. Short. Sharp.
He stopped immediately, but the damage was done.
Lu Sheng's expression did not change enough for the crowd to call anger. His eyes did.
Lin Fan bowed slightly, not as a subordinate, not as an equal, but as a disciple leaving a practice ground after receiving instruction.
Thank you for the encouragement.
Then he walked away before anyone could decide whether the scene had been victory, insult, or something worse.
Behind him, the post remained with one mark. Lu Sheng's mark. Deeper than before.
The arrogant genius had challenged him without admitting it. Lin Fan had answered without leaving a mark of his own. That meant every disciple in the court would argue over whose strength they had witnessed.
Arguments were useful. They delayed conclusions.
But Lu Sheng would not be satisfied.
Pride preferred wounds it could point to. This one had been placed under the skin. As Lin Fan left the court, the borrowed-tongue disciple who had first spoken moved aside with his face lowered.
Lin Fan paused beside him. The boy's breath hitched. Lin Fan said only, "Choose better errands."
Then he continued walking. Behind him, the boy looked toward Lu Sheng, then away. A hook had loosened.
That mattered more than the crowd's immediate noise. Public challenges were rarely decided by the two people in front. They were decided by the small hands that carried messages, repeated jokes, blocked paths, delayed notices, and chose whether to call witnesses. Lu Sheng had many such hands because disciples liked belonging to strength without paying full loyalty. Loosen enough hooks, and a proud man discovered that his reach had become shorter than his reputation. Lin Fan did not need Lu Sheng isolated. He only needed Lu Sheng to wonder who would still move when he pulled. Wonder was slower than command. In a sect where half a breath decided whether witnesses gathered or scattered, that delay was already a wound. Lin Fan had won no rank from the exchange.
He had taken something quieter. Response time. For now, that was enough. The next hand Lu Sheng raised would arrive slower, and Lin Fan would see more of the arm behind it.